Hello, my name is Paulo Dufour, and I am having a show here at the Baton Rouge Gallery, which I have titled Tides of Desire. And I thought that first of all I would talk to you about my background in glass and how I got into glass. Then I would talk a little bit about the technical aspect of my work and why I work with glass. And then lastly I would talk about the Tides of Desire as a concept and the theme of the work. These two pieces here are the culmination of about 25 years of working with blown glass, and I call this work sculpted blown glass because it takes on two different aspects of working with the material, both in blowing glass, which has traditional amphora shapes as the emphasis, or wine glasses, or some form of utilitarian object. But I also consider them sculptural objects because I work with the glass in a solid form and combine those two, the sculptural and the solid and the vessel format, to make my work. Now, I started working with glass in the 70s. I was working at LSU with my father, Paulo Dufour, who's a stained glass artist. And I worked in his studio and also went to LSU for a BFA, which I earned in 1977. And right during my last semester at school, I saw a glass blowing demonstration at an NCCA conference that was being held at LSU, and got very excited about working with blown glass, in particular a man named Marvin Leposki, who was giving the workshop. So that was my first experience with blown glass. To work with the blown glass, and I decided that that's what looked really fun and that's what I wanted to do. So I moved to California, to Oakland, California, and attended the California College of Arts and Crafts. And I had never blown glass very much, so it was a learning experience. And what was nice about going to school there was that it had glass blowers from all over the world. Like we had John Toso from Murano, we had Hans Hoagland from Sweden, we had Willie Anderson from Swaziland, we had Heikki Kallio from Norway, we had people from all over the world who came to our school to give workshops. So I got a balance of the two styles of working with glass, and that is the Italian style and the Swedish style. Now the Italians typically make very thin goblets or latticino or filigrani or different types of cane techniques. And the Swedish work much thicker and more in an amorphous way with the glass, and kind of thick, heavy work. So I kind of combined those two ways of working and started working, first of all, with very kind of straight geometric amphoras in various forms. And then I started working sculptural, and then when I started combining the two, I started getting much more excited about the work myself, because it became much more metaphorical. And what I mean by that is, when I say that glass is used metaphorically, it means that it can represent other aspects of the nature of the material, and also my own nature, because I believe that art should be somewhat biographical and reflect aspects of my own personality and what I experienced, my life, my family, my desires, and the desires that I have, and how I kind of express those in glass. Both of these pieces are figurative, and I do consider myself a figurative artist. And that has a long tradition of working with glass, and also sculpture and architectural types of environments where figures are attached to different vessels or attached to walls, or like the caryatids or the cycladic figures, in which they have a dual purpose of acting in an architectonic setting, but also acting in a metaphysical realm. So a little bit about the process. I work with a molten tank of clear glass that I then apply other colorants to that come in thick rods of color. And so I might start off with a clear bubble and then add the colorant to the inside, so blowing a bubble through there I get the color. And then I attach the blown glass, sculpted glass figure to the side of the vessel, and then I dip the whole piece back into a molten tank of glass from these different layers. It's kind of like dipping a strawberry into chocolate in a sense, and so I get these multiple layers of glass that I can then sculpt and work with. And then after the piece is cooled in a very timed and regulated way called annealing, I bring it back to my studio and grind and polish different surfaces and different facets onto the surface. Like each one of these, I grind and polish the bottom, which takes hours using different types of diamond abrasives. And it's brought back to an optical polish so that light is actually sucked up into the inside. And also I can control the angle or the balance or the kind of tipping point at which the figure and the glass are kind of shown, so that writhing motion to the glass can be put into a very controlled manner, because I want that kind of balance and imbalance, that play between the forms and how it's balanced. Let's see. The thematic content of this work is called The Tides of Desire, and I've been a lifelong observer of man's nature and study comparative mythology from many different cultures, and was raised on the Odyssey and Jason and the Argonauts and stories about mythology. Well, when my parents were very good about telling us the old stories and relating them to the new stories. So when I heard stories about Superman, I was also hearing stories about Hephaestus and, you know, the different kinds of stories of mythology. In all those stories, there are themes of the desires of men and women, and how the conflict between desires can be the impetus to do something, but they can also be the destructive aspect of greed and avarice. And we're all familiar with the 7 deadly sins and greed and holding on to attachments and the problems that are created by alcohol and drug addiction and, you know, sex and all of the things that lead into perversion when they become the object of our desire rather than a result of something that has to do with love. So that was the kind of the theme of it. And the figures, I wanted them to be kind of attached to this envelope of glass, or this vessel, and be kind of writhing and struggling and be coming out of the glass and be one solid entity. So that's the thematic quality of those things. Now, I do have another series of works besides, kind of going on at the same time. There's kind of 2 levels of work. If we could move up. Okay, so this work is non-figural because it doesn't have figures attached to them directly, but they still have layers of sculpted glass with a vessel format. And they all have different types of titles rather than being The Tides of Desires. This one is called Cicada's Amber Vessel. This is Aurora Geode. And this is Deeply Orange. So that they have to do with the colors that I use. And color is extremely important to me in the work. I feel like I have come from a long line of colorists. My father studied with Joseph Albers, and his Bauhaus and his theory on color is world-renowned. And my father was an excellent colorist. He was just amazing the way he would put colors together, and color harmonies and color theories and triads and all of those type of technical words. But in blown glass, it's very important to have translucent layers of color, opaque layers of color, and also transparent layers of color. I want to work all 3 levels so that you can see through my glass. That's why I don't really make opaque glass, because it could be some other material if it wasn't opaque. One of the reasons that I really enjoy working with the glass, because it is transparent and it has a very glassy quality. It's almost like the Vulcan who works with the forge and, you know, grabs this molten material from the earth and creates these sculptures. Hephaestus has always been, you know, the god of the craftsman, and you know, he actually, when he was thrown to earth for disobeying the gods and giving man fire, he made little robots to carry him around to continue his work in the forge, even though he was still making Zeus the lightning bolts. So in my own way, I'm making little lightning bolts when I make my glass. I kind of have a connection to that. But I want layers of color. I want deep, translucent, and kind of the luscious quality of the glass to come out. Now, if you see, there's a similarity in all three of these pieces where I've kind of pinched the outside of the glass, and I've also kind of make this V connection where the layers of glass are put on. And those started off being from the cicadas locust. And the cicadas, there's 1,500 different types and varieties of cicadas in the world. And they've, believe it or not, there's a lot in mythology, from China to Greece and all different types of mythology about the cicadas. And there's a story from Socrates in which the muses were playing their music through the cicadas, and they enticed the listeners, the people, to listen so intently that they were dancing and drinking and singing, and they got so involved with this that they turned into cicadas themselves. They actually died from not eating or drinking or sleeping. And so they became the cicadas, and their gift to them for doing that, for honoring the muses, was to become cicadas themselves. So that was kind of where I started working with cicadas forms of these layers of these kind of folded wings on the outside. And so that's the where I got the title from that. The important thing in my work, if I had to say what criterion do I look for in my own work, is I want my work to function on three levels. One is the aesthetic level. What does it have to do with art? What does it have to do with what's being made now? What does it have to do with the art world and the sculptural context in which I make my work, and how art historically I could see my own work, or where does it fit in the studio class movement, if there is such a thing. Another level would be, how does it tell who I am personally? What does it explore? How does it explore my own personality and how I relate to the world? And thirdly is, what does it have to do with the work itself? How does it become its own entity and go beyond me or what I want it to be, and how does it become something else? Because when the viewer sees one of my pieces, it doesn't know any of the history. It has to relate to the work, or the person has to relate to the work on its own individual level in its own context. So that is the unknown element to all of our work, is the artist's intention and how that disappears when the work is seen. And so that's pretty much all I have. Thank you.